Karvek had seen a lot of things in his 300-year career as the Galactic Institute's lead xenopsychologist. He had watched the Vren dissolve into puddles when confronted with abstract mathematics. He had documented the Kelthric species entering catatonic states when exposed to the color purple. He had even witnessed, and this still gave him nightmares, a Gorvian attempting to mate with a mining drill under the influence of fermented spore extract. But nothing, absolutely nothing in his extensive experience had prepared him for what he was watching right now on his display screen. A human was laughing. During a firefight, while being actively shot at by hostile forces armed with plasma rifles capable of turning organic matter into steaming puddles of regret. And not just nervous laughter, not the high-pitched keening of a mind breaking under pressure, but genuine, from the belly, tears rolling down the face, doubled-over cackling laughter, as projectiles zipped past his head, as explosions rocked the ground beneath his feet, as his fellow soldiers screamed tactical coordinates and warnings about incoming threats. The human, designated Private First Class Johnson, according to the file metadata, was laughing so hard he fell over. Then, and this was the part that made Karvek's primary thinking organ hurt, he continued laughing while lying on his back, returned fire at the enemy position with his ridiculous chemical propellant weapon, hit 3 targets with remarkable accuracy, and gasped out something that the translator matrix rendered as, "Hey Sarge, I think they are compensating for something with those big guns." Another human voice, presumably the sergeant, responded with, "Johnson, if you die laughing, I am putting that on your memorial plaque." More laughter erupted from multiple sources. The entire human unit, 12 individuals, all of them bleeding from various wounds, all of them pinned down in a tactically disadvantageous position, all of them statistically likely to die within the next 6 minutes according to Karvek's combat analysis software, were laughing like they were attending some sort of social entertainment event. Karvek paused the footage. He set down his datapad with extreme care, the kind of care you employed when handling volatile explosives or your supervisor's ego. He stood up from his workstation, walked precisely 4.7 meters to the nearest waste disposal unit, and seriously considered vomiting into it. His species did not actually vomit. They expelled toxins through dermal pores, but the sentiment remained. He wanted to reject this information on a physical level, to purge it from his system, to pretend he had never seen it, but he had seen it, and worse, much worse. This was not an isolated incident. He had 17 more files just like this one, 17 separate combat engagements where humans had responded to mortal danger with humor, with jokes, with laughter that should not exist in any rational biological framework. Karvek walked back to his workstation, picked up his datapad, and sent priority alpha communications to Then and Veshra. The message was brief. The emergency meeting required, bring sedatives. Possibly enough for all 3 of us. The humans have done something that makes no sense again, and this time it might be worse than weaponizing their own caffeine addiction. He sat down, pressed play on the footage, and watched Johnson get back up, still chuckling, still shooting, still absolutely refusing to acknowledge that he should be terrified. The combat analysis software recalculated survival probability based on observed human behavior and returned an error message. Apparently, the mathematics could not account for a species that treated certain death as comedic material. Karvek made a note in his research log. Day 462 of human observation. Subject species continues to violate every known principle of survival psychology, requesting budget increase for therapy sessions. For myself, not the human. The humans seem fine, which is part of the problem. Karvek stared at the datapad in his primary appendages, then looked up at the observation window, then back down at the pad. He repeated this cycle 4 times before accepting that yes, the information displayed was real, and no, he had not accidentally ingested a hallucinogenic compound during his morning nutrient intake. The humans, those bipedal chaos engines from the 3rd planet of an unremarkable yellow star, had done something that violated approximately 17 established principles of xenopsychology. They had laughed. During combat, while being shot at, one of them had apparently laughed so hard he fell over, and then continued laughing while returning fire from a prone position. This cannot be accurate, Karvek muttered, his translator converting his clicks and whistles into galactic standard. The data must be corrupted. But the data was not corrupted. Karvek had checked, twice. Then he had checked again, because hope springs eternal, even for a scientist whose career had been built on cold, hard facts. He was the head of xenopsychological research at the Galactic Institute, had spent 3 centuries studying the behavioral patterns of 247 species, and not once, not ever had he encountered anything like this. Species that screamed in battle? Common. Species that entered berserker rages? Documented extensively. Species that maintained eerie silence while fighting? Sure. Terrifying but understandable. But laughter? Genuine. From the abdomen, tears in the eyes laughter, while bullets or plasma bolts, or whatever primitive projectiles they preferred, zipped past their fragile, easily punctured bodies. That was new. That was wrong. That was, and he hated to use the technical term, completely insane. Then arrived at Korvik's laboratory approximately 40 minutes later, moving with the kind of speed that suggested urgency, but also the kind of caution that suggested he really did not want to be there. As chief military analyst for the Galactic Defense Consortium, Dan had seen some things. Horrible things. Things that made other species reconsider their life choices. But the expression on his face, if you could call the arrangement of his facial sensory organs an expression, suggested that whatever Korvik wanted to show him might top the list. "You summoned me with a priority alpha code," Dan said, his 4 eyes blinking in sequence. The last time someone used that code, the Kreeth had figured out how to weaponize quantum uncertainty. "Please tell me the humans have not done something similar." "Worse," Korvik replied, gesturing toward the holographic display. "They have weaponized their own psychological instability." Vashra entered the lab at that moment, because timing in the universe operated on dramatic irony, and she was the Institute's foremost combat psychologist. Her species communicated partially through color shifts in their dermal layers, and right now, she was displaying a shade that roughly translated to deeply concerned with a hint of existential dread. "I received your message," Veshra said, her voice modulator rendering her chemical signals into words. "You said it was urgent. You said it involved the humans. You said I should bring sedatives. The sedatives are for us, not them," Korvik clarified. "Please, both of you, observe." He activated the holographic playback. The footage showed a human military unit, designation Charlie Company, engaged in what the humans called a firefight, which seemed like an inadequate term for the chaos displayed. The humans were pinned down behind various pieces of cover, enemy forces advancing from multiple directions, projectile weapons creating that distinctive crack-crack-crack sound that meant you are probably going to die soon. And then, clear as anything, one of the humans said something. The translation matrix rendered it as, "Hey, Johnson, remember that thing your mother said about choosing a safer career?" And then he laughed. Others joined in. Not nervous laughter, not the high-pitched keening of hysteria. Genuine amusement, the kind you might hear at a social gathering, while discussing something mildly entertaining. Ben's eyes stopped blinking in sequence and just. All 4 at once stayed open. "No." "Yes," Korvik confirmed. "That is not possible," Veshra said, her skin shifting to a color that meant questioning the nature of reality itself. "And yet," Korvik gestured at the display where a human designated Marcus Webb had just made another joke. Something about inadequate dental coverage while actively bleeding from a shoulder wound. The thing about humans, and this was documented extensively in the files marked "Do Not Engage," unless absolutely necessary, was that they came from what the galactic community politely termed a high-intensity survival environment. Other species used less polite terms. Deathworld, nightmare planet. That ball of suffering and violence where evolution apparently got drunk and decided to make everything terrible. Earth, as the humans called it, had weather that could kill you, animals that wanted to kill you, plants that could kill you, and microorganisms that specialized in killing you in creative ways. The gravity was punishing by galactic standards. The atmosphere was corrosive. The tectonic activity was absurd, and somehow, impossibly, humans had not only survived but thrived, developing complex societies, art, philosophy, and an absolutely baffling sense of humor. Previous encounters with Deathworld species had established certain patterns. They were aggressive. Yes, dangerous. Absolutely. But they were predictable. You knew what you were getting. A Kraelthar from Sigma Draconis Thorth would charge at threats with single-minded fury, immune to pain, unstoppable until you put enough firepower into them to matter. Terrifying but understandable. Humans, though. Humans were different. They did things that made no sense from a survival standpoint. They formed emotional attachments to other species and kept them as companions. Even though those species could not contribute to survival, they created art about their own mortality and found it entertaining. They had entire categories of humor dedicated to inappropriate timing, which they called dark comedy or gallows humor, and they thought it was hilarious. The galactic community had classified humans as unstable but potentially manageable, approximately 60 years ago when first contact had occurred. That classification was looking more and more inadequate with each passing cycle. There must be an explanation, then said, still staring at the frozen hologram. A chemical imbalance? A species-wide neurological condition? I thought so too, Karvik replied, pulling up additional files. But look at this. And unfortunately this. More footage played. Humans joking during a ship breach, making puns while under siege. Singing, actually singing during an ambush. In one particularly disturbing clip, a human medic was treating wounded soldiers while keeping up a running commentary about the quality of enemy marksmanship, critiquing their technique, offering suggestions for improvement, all while people were actively trying to kill her. Veshra's color shifted through several shades that did not have pleasant translations. This violates everything we understand about stress response. When confronted with mortal danger, a species should experience fear, triggering either fight, flight, or freeze responses. It is what is laughter even for? According to human research, Karvik said, pulling up more files, laughter serves multiple social and psychological functions: bonding, stress relief, cognitive reframing, social signaling. But this application of it is unprecedented. The research team spent the next several cycles analyzing every piece of combat footage they could access, which was substantial, because humans had been involved in approximately 47 conflicts since joining the galactic community, and they documented everything. Humans love documentation. They recorded battles, analyzed them, learned from them, and apparently made jokes about them the entire time. Karvik's working theory, which he was increasingly certain was correct but desperately hoped was wrong, was that humans had somehow evolved to use humor as a combat enhancement mechanism. Every other species experienced decreased cognitive function under extreme stress, tunnel vision, reduced decision-making capability, impaired fine motor control, standard survival responses that kept you alive long enough to escape, but made you less effective in prolonged engagements. Humans, somehow, impossibly, seemed to get better. Their accuracy improved, their tactical decisions became sharper, their unit cohesion increased, and the more they joked, the more they laughed, the more effective they became. It was like watching a species turn their own terror into fuel, transforming what should paralyze them into what empowered them. Look at this engagement, then said, highlighting a section of footage from a border skirmish. Human unit is outnumbered 3-1. Standard tactical analysis suggests immediate retreat. But watch, right here, one of them says. He checked the translation. Well, at least we will have an exciting story for the bar. And then, Veshra prompted. And then they win. Then said flatly, decisively, with minimal casualties, while continuing to maintain verbal communication that serves no tactical purpose except to keep themselves amused. Karvik pulled up neurological scans, hormone analysis, genetic markers, anything that might explain the phenomenon. Human brain chemistry during combat was fascinating and horrifying. Their stress hormones spiked. Yes, as expected, but alongside the cortisol and adrenaline there were endorphins, dopamine, serotonin, the same neurochemicals associated with pleasure, with reward. Within this was the concerning part: addictive behavior. They are getting a positive feedback response from combat stress, Karvik said slowly. The laughter triggers a chemical cascade that makes them feel good, which reinforces the behavior, which makes them more effective, which creates more stress, which triggers more laughter. It is a loop that makes them better at killing things. Then added helpfully, I need a sedative now, Veshra announced, her color shifting to something that probably meant, I have seen too much and require chemical assistance. The team ran simulations trying to recreate the conditions that triggered human laughter in combat. They failed. Repeatedly. Spectacularly. The simulations could not account for the sheer unpredictability of human responses. In one scenario designed to induce maximum stress, the simulated humans should have experienced complete psychological breakdown. The actual humans, when placed in a similar situation during a training exercise, started a betting pool about who could make the best joke under fire. This is impossible to model, then said, staring at the simulation results. Their behavior follows no logical pattern. It is as if they actively choose the response that makes the least sense from a survival perspective. Unless, Karvik said thoughtfully, survival for humans does not mean the same thing it means for us. We think of survival as avoiding death. What if humans think of survival as maintaining psychological cohesion? What if the laughter is not despite the danger, but because of it? What if it is how they keep their minds intact when everything around them is trying to break them? That thought sat in the lab like a physical presence. Uncomfortable and unavoidable. More evidence accumulated. Humans singing in the trenches. Humans making elaborate pranks in active war zones. Humans nicknaming their enemies with absurd titles and then using those nicknames in official reports. One human commander had apparently renamed an enemy position Frank's House of Inadequate Life Choices, and the name had stuck, appearing in 3 separate after-action reports. They are mocking death itself, Veshra observed. Not out of disrespect, but as a weapon. They are refusing to let fear control them by turning it into entertainment. Which makes them, Karvik concluded, possibly the most dangerous species we have ever encountered. Because you cannot intimidate something that thinks fear is funny. The breakthrough came when the research team finally secured permission to interview an actual human, not just study them from a distance like particularly volatile chemical compounds. His name was Marcus Webb, sergeant in the Human Marine, currently on leave after a deployment that had gone, in military terminology, completely sideways. He entered the interview room with the kind of casual confidence that suggested he either did not understand the situation or understood it perfectly and found it amusing. Karvik suspected the latter. So, Marcus said, settling into the chair designed for human physiology, I heard you folks have some questions about why we laugh when people shoot at us. That about right? That is, yes. Essentially correct, Karvik replied, trying to maintain professional composure. Your species displays behavioral patterns that contradict established psychological principles. We are attempting to understand the mechanism. Marcus grinned, which Karvik had learned was a human expression that could mean anything from genuine pleasure to imminent violence. Context dependent. Doc, you ever been in a situation so messed up, so completely beyond repair that the only thing you can do is laugh about it? No, Karvik admitted. My species experiences stress through chromatophoric expression and pheromone release. Right. Well, that is the thing about us humans, Marcus said, leaning forward. We come from a planet that spent millions of years trying to kill us. Everything there wanted us dead. The weather, the animals, the diseases, all of it. So we evolved this neat little trick. We decided that if we were going to die anyway, we might as well make jokes about it. Then, observing from behind the one-way screen, made a note that roughly translated to, this species is clinically insane and I want no part of this conversation. But the laughter improves your combat effectiveness, Karvik pressed. It is not merely a coping mechanism, it actively enhances your performance. Sure does, Marcus agreed. You know what is really scary in combat? Silence. When everyone is quiet, that is when you know people are losing it. Fear is creeping in, but when someone cracks a joke, when someone makes the whole situation seem ridiculous, suddenly you remember that you are not alone. You are with your unit, your friends. And if you are going out together, and you might as well make it memorable. He paused, considering. Plus it really messes with the enemy. You ever try to maintain tactical superiority against someone who keeps making fun of your aim? It is psychologically destabilizing for them, and confidence building for us. When Veshra's color shifted to something that might have been grudging respect or possibly nausea. The translation was imprecise. You weaponized your own psychological defense mechanism, Karvik said slowly. You took the thing that keeps your mind intact and turned it into a tactical advantage. We weaponize everything, Marcus said cheerfully. It is kind of our thing. Fire, atoms, coffee, passive-aggressive meeting notes, you name it. Why not weaponize joy? That sentence would haunt Karvik for the rest of his very long life. The interview continued for another hour, with Marcus explaining concepts like gallows humor, laughing in the face of death, and something called, if you don't laugh you will cry, so you might as well laugh. Each explanation made perfect sense from a human perspective, and absolutely no sense from any rational biological standpoint. Here is the thing you folks need to understand, Marcus said as the interview concluded. We know we are fragile. We know our bodies are basically meat balloons full of important fluids that need to stay inside. We know that one decent hit in the wrong place and we are done. But we also know that fear is a choice. and we choose not to be afraid. Or, more accurately, we choose to be afraid and do the thing anyway, and make jokes about it because what else are you going to do? Cry, that is not going to stop the bullets. After Marcus left, the three researchers sat in silence for approximately 10 minutes. I want to change careers, then announced. Perhaps something in agriculture. Vegetables do not laugh at danger. I need more than sedatives, Veshra added. I need a complete memory wipe of this entire interaction. Karvik said nothing, because he was having what humans might call an epiphany, and what his species called a catastrophic realignment of fundamental understanding. The humans were not unstable. They were perfectly stable, just stable in a way that made no sense to anyone who had not evolved on a planet actively hostile to life. They had taken the stress that should break them and turned it into bonding, entertainment, and combat effectiveness. The research team requested permission to observe human military units in actual combat situations, because apparently they had not suffered enough. Permission was granted, mostly because the Galactic Defense Consortium wanted to understand what they were dealing with before humans inevitably ended up fighting alongside or, more terrifyingly, against other member species. The observation took place during a border patrol mission that went wrong when raiders decided to test the defenses. The human unit responded with textbook tactics, excellent communication, and, yes, constant jokes. One soldier took a grazing hit to the leg and immediately said, "Well, there goes my modeling career." Another pointed out that the enemy's formation was giving strong "we did not read the manual" energy. The unit commander, calling in fire support, somehow managed to include a pun about artillery in his communication, and they won, easily, decisively. While laughing, Karvik watched from the safety of an observation ship and understood finally what made humans so dangerous. It was not their technology, though that was impressive. It was not their aggression, though they had plenty. It was that they refused to let the universe break them. They took everything terrible, every moment of fear and pain and danger, and they transformed it into something they could share with each other, something that made them stronger. They had weaponized hope itself. The report to the Galactic Council did not go well, which Karvik had anticipated, but the level of denial displayed by certain council members exceeded even his pessimistic expectations. Chancellor Orvix, a methane-breathing bureaucrat from a low-gravity world, listened to the entire presentation with what could only be described as mounting horror. "You are telling me," he said slowly, "that the humans become more effective in combat the more danger they face because they think danger is amusing." "That is an oversimplification, but essentially correct," Karvik confirmed. "Their laughter triggers a neurochemical response that enhances cognitive function, unit cohesion, and tactical decision-making. They have, through millions of years of evolution on a hostile world, turned their stress response into a performance enhancement mechanism." "This is absurd," another council member declared, her translator rendering her outrage clearly. "Species do not work that way. You are suggesting they violate fundamental biological principles." "I am suggesting," Karvik said carefully, "that humans evolved under conditions none of our species experienced. Earth is classified as a Class 12 death world. The next highest classification for a homeworld of any council species is Class 7. Humans had to adapt to survive, and this is how they adapted." Then stepped forward with the military analysis. "If I may, Chancellor, the tactical implications are significant. Human units consistently outperform predicted outcomes in high-stress situations. They do not break under pressure, they get better. Attempting to intimidate them through displays of force or threats is counterproductive, as they appear to find such attempts entertaining." "You are recommending we do not engage humans in prolonged conflict," Orvik said, reading ahead in the report. "I am recommending," then replied, "that we never, under any circumstances, engage humans in prolonged conflict, unless we are prepared for casualties that escalate proportionally to our attempts to inflict them. They are a species that becomes more dangerous the harder you try to kill them. This is, strategically speaking, a nightmare scenario." Veshra provided the psychological assessment, which was essentially, they are all insane but in a highly functional way that makes them excellent allies and terrifying enemies. She used more professional language, but that was the core message. The council debated for hours. Some members wanted to restrict human expansion. Others wanted to recruit humans specifically for their combat effectiveness. A few suggested extensive study before making any decisions, which was the closest thing to wisdom Karvik heard all day. Eventually, Chancellor Orvix made his ruling. The humans will be reclassified from unstable but potentially manageable to stable in unpredictable ways. Approach with caution and possibly humor. Their military will be flagged as high-priority recruitment for coalition forces, and, this is critical, no member species is authorized to engage Earth or human colonies in hostile action without unanimous council approval. Because they will fight back, someone asked. Because they will fight back while laughing, Orvix corrected. And that, apparently, makes them nearly impossible to defeat. Karvik stood in the observation deck of the Institute, watching a human transport ship dock at the station. He could hear laughter from the docking bay. Human crew members exchanging what his translator rendered as jokes about the station's food quality and humorous observations about alien anatomy. They were so casual, so at ease, so completely unbothered by the fact that they were fragile biological entities floating in the void of space, one hull breach away from death. 3 cycles of research, countless hours of analysis, multiple interviews, and Korvik finally understood. Humans did not laugh despite the danger. They laughed because of it, because laughter meant they were alive. They were together, and whatever the universe threw at them, they would face it with their companions, their friends, their fellow fragile meat balloons full of important fluids. They had taken the most terrifying fact of existence, that death was inevitable and life was dangerous, and they had decided to make it funny. Not to diminish it, but to rob it of its power over them. A human walked past the observation window, noticed Karvik watching and waved. Then, because humans could not help themselves, she pressed a small sign against the window. It read, in Galactic Standard, "Smile, you are on camera, and also we are all going to die someday, so you might as well enjoy the show." Karvik did not have the facial structure to smile, but he flashed his chromatophores in the pattern his species used for acknowledgement of shared absurdity. The human gave him a thumbs up, which he had learned meant approval, and walked away laughing at something her companion said. Karvik turned back to his datapad and began composing a message to his colleagues. "Further research required," he typed. "Humans continue to violate established principles of psychology, biology, and tactical analysis. Recommend ongoing study, possibly from a safe distance, and development of sense of humor for all researchers assigned to human interaction protocols." He paused, considered, then added one final note. "Also recommend investment in human entertainment. If we are going to coexist with a species that thinks everything is funny, we should probably understand what they find amusing. Current leading theory: everything. Especially danger. Especially death. Especially us trying to understand that." From somewhere in the station, Karvik heard an explosion, then laughter, then a human voice saying something about "that is definitely going in the incident report." He checked the station alerts. No actual emergency, just humans conducting what they called live fire training exercises, and what everyone else called unnecessarily dangerous activities that should be prohibited. The humans were not unstable, Karvik decided. The humans were simply playing a different game than everyone else. One where the rules included laugh at everything and never let them see you scared. And if you are going to die anyway, go out with a good joke. It was terrifying. It was incomprehensible. It was somehow inspiring. Karvik downloaded the latest human comedy special onto his datapad. If he was going to spend the next few decades studying these bizarre primates, he might as well try to understand what made them tick. The title was Laughing Through the Apocalypse, a human comedy special. Of course it was.